rather than us going, oh, can we exploit human knowledge? Can we now go beyond that in our creativity? And I think that's going to be terribly exciting over the next few decades.
Welcome to the Coursera Podcast. I'm Arunav Sinha, Vice President of Global Communications at Coursera. More than 125 million learners have used Coursera to access content and credentials from top university and industry educators. Every day we witness how technology creates unprecedented opportunities for us to learn from the world's best instructors. On the Coursera Podcast, I will have conversations with renowned experts and industry leaders to explore global trends impacting the future of education and the future of work. Together, we will discover cutting-edge ideas that will empower you to advance your career, transform teams, and drive positive change within your organizations. And I'm excited to go on this journey with you. Today's episode will focus on creativity, an essential skill in the modern workplace. The World Economic Forum listed creative thinking as one of the top skills in the 2023 Future of Jobs report. But developing new ideas and communicating them can be a real challenge, especially at work, where the environment is fast-paced and we are constantly under pressure to stay ahead of the competition. How do we break away from routine and tap into our creative abilities to produce tangible outcomes? We'll discuss that and more with our inaugural guest, Professor Peter Childs. Peter is head of Dyson School of Engineering and the Professorial Lead in Engineering Design at Imperial College London. Peter has dedicated almost 40 years to engineering design and innovation, from rural-urban migration and sustainable energy to aerothermal and sports technology. He has contributed to over 180 journals, conference papers, and several books, including the Handbook on Mechanical Design Engineering. In 2019, Peter took his teachings worldwide with Coursera, developing a creative thinking course that has now been completed by almost 300,000 learners. In July 2023, he expanded the course and launched a three-part specialization, Creative Thinking Tools for Success and Leadership, which is available now on Coursera. Peter is joining us from the UK. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to engage in this conversation.
Peter, I'm so excited to host you as our inaugural guest. There are many conventional notions about creativity. Are you born with it, or you must cultivate it as a skill? Do engineers see things binary? Or do people with humanities background have an advantage in applying disparate ideas? And the other big question these days, what is the future of creativity in the age of AI? Before we dive into all these dimensions, let's dig into how all this has started and your passion for the field. So my first question is, how did your work in the field of design engineering influence your interest in study of creativity?
I love your introduction to me, and introductions are always fascinating because they come about by a construction. There's a narrative associated with them. But my first business was actually selling records from a market stall, old-fashioned vinyl. And so, as a teenager, I loved music. Then it was sort of rock music. My second business was actually a knitwear business, and set it up in Peru, doing high-end alpaca knitwear and selling it in Europe, well, in the UK, a bit in Japan and a bit in the US. I have a broad background, actually. I even did an apprenticeship, and I did go to university and I did do engineering, but my engineering built on these experiences. And yes, we might describe ourselves by our profession, but we all have so many ways of describing ourselves. And perhaps in early years, my interests were very broad in languages, in history, in art, as well as in technology. And so whilst I may ultimately have gone to university and studied engineering, that, as I say, built upon broad interests, broad experiences in woodworking, in knitwear, in business. That has actually been my story through life. I've always done a mix of enterprise and some academic work as well. And yes, engineering is broad. I became a lecturer in the UK, And encouraging people on ideas, that got me into design, and that actually got me into studying creativity. I read a book called The Creative Mind by Maggie Bowden, and that was one of the big works at the time, sort of 35 years ago. This amazing exploration of how people think and some of the fundamentals of creativity, which span the humanities, the sciences, and beyond. We can classify ourselves by, I don't know, a particular title, but I think it goes much broader. And why not?
Absolutely. From selling vinyl records to starting a business in Peru, that's as broad as it can be. And I would love to talk to you about, what artists should be doing in the age of AI as well, and some of those. We'll touch on those dimensions.
We'll get there. We'll
Yeah,
get there. We will get
we'll
there.
get there. But yeah, but first, I think the fundamental question is, and since you are a researcher as well, can you explain the science behind creativity? What happens in our brain when we build ideas and create things?
I'm very happy to do that. But everybody, I'm going to say some stuff. Everybody's creative. I really do believe this. There are over 7 billion of us on Earth, and every one of us is creative. So, it's just important to get that out there. Also, some of the definitions of creativity. What is it that we are so proud of? What is it that we put effort into investigating? Creativity is often regarded as the ability to imagine or invent something of value. And that value could be financial, but it also could be personal or societal. There's another definition that I love, that creativity is imagination with responsibility. If you are researching the topic of creativity, you'll soon find that there are about 80 quite strong definitions of creativity, each of them saying different things. And you've just asked me, what's the science of, what is it? What's the science of it? Well, I've suggested that it's ability to do something new of value, or to come up with ideas that are new and of value. So there are judgments associated with it. But now we're talking about ideas. And one of the fundamental concepts and approaches to creativity is combination. And all of us get this. Can I take two ideas from my long-term memory, and they may be very different, combine them together, and then evaluate or think, is there something interesting there? So, iron and butterfly, completely different concepts. One's a living entity, one's a material. Combine them together. Well, I'm going to go back to my 1980s record business. It's a really good name of a band.
That's right. That's right. And at Coursera, we often say learning is the source of human progress. And many ways, creativity is built into learning, our ability to transfer knowledge to next generation. So you can start accumulating knowledge, and you don't necessarily have to create something new all the time, but you build on those ideas. Is that what sets human apart from other species?
Yes, you loaded a wonderful question there. Can animals be creative? Well, many people have looked at this. Crows don't go to crow school, and they seem to be able to pick up a twig, a bit of stick, and fly with it, even though it's got an unusual shape. They arrive at their nest, and they are able to conceive and how to intertwine it to make their nest. There are all sorts of studies of this type of thing, and many people think that predators have high IQ, and one of the facets often associated with high IQ up to certain levels is notions of creativity. I think we will find that other species can be creative and are creative in their own way. To me, that's wonderful. Humans, yeah, we're all wonderful too. We can enhance our creativity. We are populating this planet and doing amazing things on this planet and now beyond. So there are so many examples of our creativity, as I say, in our personal lives, within professions, within domains. And that, to me, is just wonderful. Let's know a bit more about it. Let's enhance it. Let other species do their thing, and we will study them. It's going to be interesting. Setting us apart, Well, do we need to be set apart? We find quite good ways of setting ourselves apart already. Let us do our things. Let dolphins do their things. Let chimpanzees do their things.
Oh, that's right. And Peter, the fascinating thing about your career is that it spans many years, many 20 plus years. And plus, you've done this across many geographies and institutions and across businesses. And you're a practitioner as well in many ways. So, how has our approach to creativity changed over the past 20 years?
There are many standard approaches to creativity. People have done brainstorming, many types of brainstorming. So, whether it's using sticky notes or some kind of electronic modern equivalent, or whether it's passing pieces of paper with half an idea to somebody else and letting them build upon it, there are many approaches to brainstorming. And so, people have developed good practice. And knowledge about these. In fact, I've researched or got my PhDs and postdocs to research over 1,500 approaches to creativity. I'm not on my own. There are many other academics and experts around the world and groups who've looked at this kind of thing. We have a very large body of knowledge about creativity, what works, what inhibits creativity, how we can enhance personal creativity, how we can work with groups, how we can better smooth the journey between an idea and a innovation. Innovation is sometimes regarded as the realization of value from creativity. And that innovation, as I say, could be business, but it could also be around some kind of societal intervention. Charities innovate as well as businesses, for example. So we have this big body of information arising from many domains. So psychology has been influential here, so has neuroscience, but so have domain-specific studies on how people are creative within medicine, within engineering, within the arts and humanities. So I've had a delightful 30 years or so looking at this, exploring some of these methodologies and applying them across the arts and humanities and into the sciences, technology and engineering. Over that period, we have gone from good practice or best practice in some of these sort of paper-based or procedural-based approaches to now where we are working alongside generative artificial intelligence and generative approaches empowered by heavy computation. And humans have become directors of creativity as well as agents of creativity. So working alongside tools and actors that are doing what we're asking them to do or just working away in the background, we are able to further enhance over and above what we might have done with traditional brainstorming approaches.
Right. And that's a great segue to what I was going to ask you is what impact do you think these technologies will have on human skills like creativity?
Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence in this era, and so they should. We've been developing these capabilities for the last 70 years or so, and lots of capabilities have matured at this point in time. One of the standard approaches to artificial intelligence today, embodied in tools like ChatGPT, which is a very large language model, it's based upon the knowledge from human history, or the written knowledge of human history largely. And so these large models are amazing because they pull together so much human knowledge, but it's existing or historical human knowledge. I think therein lies a key as to what's going to happen next, because we can use these models, and because they're trained on existing human knowledge, there is a limitation. Those tools are really good at repeating what we already know, or maybe doing slight developments or making connections which maybe we hadn't thought of, but it's based upon existing human knowledge. That still leaves the space for the human to do something completely new that's not been recorded in the books and the journal papers and the sort of written record of the human race. These large models do their machine learning on. And I think that's terribly exciting. Rather than us going, oh, can we exploit human knowledge, historical human knowledge? Can we now go beyond that in our creativity? And I think that's going to be terribly exciting over the next few decades.
Yeah, but Peter, there are some real concerns about intellectual property, right? Especially with regard to using historical knowledge, but combining disparate work and creating some new type of work, especially important in the area of art, uh, and even written work as well, where prose can be combined to create entirely new type of content. Uh, are there some, one is, do you feel that this is a real concern? And second, for content creators and artists, and second, how do we protect the intellectual property? Means this is a tough subject, but I just wonder what's your initial thinking as a creator.
I've met artists who have diverse views on this topic. One of the artists took photographs herself of thousands of, in fact, she took about 6,000 photographs of a particular type of flower. It was a tulip. She then used that as the training base for artificial intelligence in order to generate new images of that particular flower, forming the database that is being used for generative design, essentially. And I think that's very clever, very astute. We could be concerned about exploitation of data, or we could actually take control. And in that case, that artist took control. Imagine that you are a songwriter and you've been making notes of your songs over the years, and perhaps you have thousands of them. It seems to be the case with a lot of these databases and machine learning approaches that you need quite a large data set in order to train them. Typically, you need about 6,000 sets of data. But it could be that you've got that. Again, upload that, train a bespoke AI model on your own work so you can then further generate. I think there's going to be a lot of examples like this where people take control in their own ways. So I've not entirely answered your question, but I've given you some insights about how people are working with AI approaches in very sensitive domains such as music and art.
And potentially citation and credits will become standard as we start harnessing work available broadly on internet. At the heart, you are an instructor, you're a teacher. So let's talk a little bit about your specialization, which is creative thinking, a specialization that you teach on Coursera. And it talks a lot about utilizing generative AI to be more creative and encourage higher level thinking. Can you share some examples of technology driven creativity tools like Scamper?
So Scamper is just a set of provocations. Scamper stands for substitution, combination, adaptation, putting to other uses, erasing and rearranging. So it's a wonderful tool which 5-year-olds can use and 95-year-olds can use. You can wander down the street and you go, what can I substitute? What can I combine? What can I adapt? And these are powerful provocations. Of course, one can use technology. So one can type the word substitute into a search engine, or one can even do a more sophisticated question to a large learning model in order to get some suggestions back. It's not so different to using a thesaurus in years gone by. So powerful tools which prompt thoughts in your own mind. You can use them in combination with search engines or AI tools in order to give you more consideration. One of the principles of brainstorming from 70 years ago in Alex Osborne's work was that quantity of ideas breeds quality ideas through selection and refinement. So if either by your own thinking or by using a tool to prompt lots of suggestions, you can get lots of ideas around substitution and then pick ones which mean something to you, or ones which you think are good, by whatever means necessary. That may move your thinking on, and you may, as a result, be able to get valuable ideas from this. So this is an example of taking a classical approach to creativity, the use of provocations from Scamper, and then combining it with modern tools which we often all use, whether it's the large language learning models or whether it's the use of search engines. If that's what you want to do, great. If you just want to go for a walk in the park and just think through what can I substitute, what can I combine, again, great.
Can even organizations apply that to build into strategy, product planning, operational executions? Are there some additional suggestions that you have for companies and institutions?
There are many approaches to creativity, and in the 3 courses as part of this specialization, we help learners develop skills in about 25 different approaches to creativity, a valuable skill set in itself. Many of those tools can be used individually. Some of them can also be used in groups. Some of them are applicable through your professional life within an organization. Some of them are going to be good in your personal life. We use a framework called the Creativity Diamond to aid practitioners, any learner, in helping to select particular approaches to creativity that are good for them and help them get the most out of them. The notion of using a framework is certainly something that I think is valuable to guide you through selection of a tool and implementation of tools. And that can also be used and deployed within an organization. These approaches really are valuable. One of the types of tool is a systematic tool. And there are several examples of systematic tools. One of them is called morphological analysis. Morphological analysis is really about exploring idea options. And when you're exploring idea options, you can actually end up with millions of scenarios. It benefits then from either some kind of program to assist you in eliminating the less likely or less valuable ideas, or taking advantage of a group effort in order to explore that idea space. Again, if you go back to one of the principles of brainstorming from Alex Osborne, that quality of ideas or benefits from a quantity of ideas, but evaluating those ideas in order to pick the ones which have value associated with them, and then you deploy your resource on a very few or just one idea in order to implement it. So exploring a large idea space systematically means that you will be less likely of overlooking good ideas, and that's going to be important within an organization, within a company perhaps, to realize what's a good idea for your company, but also to anticipate what your competition might do. The systematic approaches to creativity, I think, are really valuable in exploring an idea space.
Can you talk about an example? Can you bring this to life? Means whether you're consulting with a company or any company which has implemented a very systematic approach. Because why I'm asking that question, Peter, is many times there are great ideas companies have, but the cost of implementing and cost of going wrong is so high that deters them from implementing those ideas, trying those ideas. And you talked about a systematic approach, so highest probable ideas get implemented and you find ROI in those. Uh, any examples that can really help listeners?
So there's a great example from the study of creativity. One of the systematic approaches is called the theory of inventive problem solving. And in this approach, lots of patents were analysed, and that analysis resulted in 40 principles of invention. And those 40 principles of invention have now stood the test of time since 1946. And no new principle of invention has been added, despite people reanalyzing patents and seeing whether there is some new inventive principle. A classic example often associated with TRIZ, this theory of inventive problem solving, is the notion of hot water heating for a coffee or a cup of tea. Do you want to boil a large quantity of water in a kettle, or do you want to heat up the fluid just in time for the enjoyment of your drink? Many of us are now used to hot taps, which dispense steam or water at somewhere between 95 and 98 degrees C, where the heater is in the faucet of the tap or in the nozzle. And there are many drinks machines which do the heating very locally so that you heat up just the right quantity just in time. And there are many advantages of doing this. But it all came from a detailed analysis of the idea space and elimination of alternative scenarios, alternative ways of doing it. There is an example where many of us have had the experience of that in our high-end kitchens or in the dispensers associated with coffee machines.
Fascinating. And you have taught and researched across the globe. Have you found that our approaches to creativity differs from country to country or culture to culture?
In the way that I grew up, I went through British education, and I remember there were assumptions around how perhaps in other countries people did more copying and were not so original. Having travelled the globe, I found that People in Asia are amazingly creative. People in North America are amazingly creative. And my own country is amazingly creative, but no more so than another country. Actually, what I would say is that people are creative. There's something around talent. There's a phrase around talent that if you want to find talent, you need to prospect for it. There will be people who are better at drawing than me, better at coming up with an artistic idea than I am. And I actually delight in that. I don't have to be the best at everything, and one really isn't. And so going into another country, you find that some people in that country have a particular talent at various art forms, and they are exploring ideas in an innovative fashion and taking that art domain further than you've seen anywhere else. I think that there is not a patent on creativity or ownership of creativity by any one community. I think that it's something where communities of practice can flourish anywhere in the world and really push boundaries. Of course, resources help. If you want to do technology, then it helps to have wet rooms and computer labs and 3D printers and machining capabilities and time. If you don't have that, you may struggle. If you are exploring new art forms, then again, you need resources, and time is one of those principal resources. So we often find that innovation is associated with those who have the freedom of time.
Mm-hmm. And Peter, you pointed as something very valuable that you need to have time, and time is a resource. That means you need to have some empty canvas, time to think through certain ideas and apply. But we are also living in an age where there's a lot of attention deficit. We are moving screen to screen, meeting to meetings. Um, do you think there is a real danger and impact of technology and how people think about these, and it'll potentially exacerbate problems, and the quality of ideas that come about may not necessarily be that high quality?
Great questions. There's so many things which are feeding in here. We have been using machines throughout the last few hundred years in order to do things quicker, to actually free up time. When washing machines came in or dishwashers came in, it freed up time to do other things. So there is already the principle that technology can be deployed in order to make time for something else. And I think that principle can be applied to thinking. Part of this conversation was early on about, can we use AI to actually help supplement and enhance our ideas? Well, you still need time to interact with an AI engine and then explore what that might mean to you and your ideas. So I think the principle is there about deploying a resource in order to help you have the resource of time to really extend a particular domain, a particular idea direction, and to explore that. The other amazing thing about the resources that we do now have is that you can go into details and you can really test your ideas, often from a desktop, a laptop. And I think that's quite valuable, because being able to test an idea tells you, oh, is it good? Is it not so good? Do I need to refine it? Do I need to do further elaboration?
And as we come towards the end of the podcast, I want to ask, since you're a proponent of creativity, you're a practitioner of creativity as well, why is it even important to teach people how to be creative?
Anytime I look around the world, I see wonderful things. I'm afraid I do judge. I also see some things which I'm not so content or happy with. So, wanting to see change in our world, well, yes, I do. I want to see improvements. I want to see win-win scenarios. And chatting to young students, they absolutely want to see change. And young people should see change. It's one of the joys, perhaps, of being young, is that you can look around your world and go, yes, we're going to change this. We're going to make it even better than our parents and our grandparents managed. And our world does face challenges, whether it's well-being, whether it's sense of self, or whether it's about our planet and sustainability. Many people have concerns, and I think creativity can be deployed to tackle and enhance our current efforts towards ever better solutions. That has to be, for me, a motivator. And I just love working with people who want to create ideas, whether they are in their 80s and 90s or whether they're 18 or 19 or younger. All of us can enhance our creative skills. And there's so many needs in our world where we could deploy those skills for a meaningful outcome.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And I'm sure that listeners would be very interested. Listen, I want to be creative, but can you suggest few quick tips that I can introduce in my life to be creative in everyday problems?
Whenever you're stuck, go for a walk in the park. Top tip, everybody's been saying that for centuries, and it really does work. Explore combinations and just think them through. It really is true from the study of creativity that quantity of ideas breeds quality through selection and refinement. So if you can think of a whole set of combinations of diverse things and you go, is there something interesting there? Ponder it for a while and explore it, then explore a different combination. So this notion of having many ideas before you make a decision is a fundamental associated with creativity. Taking inspiration from nature, a bit different to going for a walk in the park. One of the approaches to creativity is called biomimicry. And exploring and seeing how nature does things, getting some insight associated with that of the specific details of how nature achieves its solutions, and then seeing whether that's relevant to one of your scenarios. Although I teach and encourage people to learn about a lot of approaches to creativity, I actually suggest that once you've learnt about a whole, maybe 20 or 30 approaches to creativity, maybe pick 5 or 6 that are useful to you and that you like, and then you limit yourselves to those. Really develop your skills in those 5 or 6 approaches to creativity. And maybe on a given problem or challenge, you maybe only use 2 or 3 approaches to creativity to tackle it. You don't do them all, you limit yourselves. And each of us are different. Each of us will find different approaches are helpful to us, or we just have a preference.
Yeah, Peter, I have also found that writing those ideas down in a piece of paper imparts a lot of clarity and it helps you with selection analysis later. Is that something that you found useful?
You're so right. You're so right. Our short term memory lasts 2 to 30 seconds or thereabouts. So if you don't write it down or do an email to self or a note to self or a voice message and record it, you may find that that idea is just lost. That waking moment in the middle of the night when you go, I got it. Turn the light on, write it down. As I say, do a text to yourself, whatever is your way of recording. Absolutely essential. So, Arnav, you keep writing down your ideas. It's vital.
Absolutely. This has been a fascinating conversation, Peter. I learned so much, and I'm sure a lot of listeners of Coursera podcast would learn a lot from you. There is a reason why more than 300,000 people have taken your course, and many more would, as this work inspires creativity around the world. One parting question: where can audience find you, and if they would like to know more about your work, where can they go apart from subscribing on the course? Are there other ways in which they can reach you?
One of the joys of having done the massive online open course with Coursera is that people have actually come and found me in person. So I work in Exhibition Road in South Kensington in London, which is just next door to the Science Museum and the Natural History Museum. So I've actually done a lot of tea and cake with people who've done the courses. Yes, I have done a lot of journal papers and conference papers and diverse books. That information is out there. I also attempt to practice what I preach. So I'm chair of the board of directors of 2 companies. One does robots for offshore wind turbine inspection, repair and maintenance. Everybody loves sustainable power generation. We're doing robots to keep those wind turbines onshore and offshore going. Even by consuming electricity, you're actually in a curious way accessing some of my work. And I also do a different company, help work with a company that does thermal insulation of buildings. So we do a robot which goes underneath houses and deploys thermal insulation material on flooring. To me, this is about ideas are about taking them through to reality, all being well, doing things which are meaningful to people and helpful to people. So even in my professional life, I try and practice what I preach and deploy those ideas. So the answer is going to be that there are many ways by which we can engage together.
Thank you, Peter. We are so honored and privileged to access your knowledge, creativity, thoughts, and ideas through courses on Coursera, as well as your books and journals and other ways in which you propagating ideas. Thank you very much for being my inaugural guest on the Coursera podcast, and I look forward to continuing our conversation over the next few months. Thank you.
Aaron, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for all your great questions.
A big thanks to Professor Childs for joining us today. In summary, while artificial intelligence like ChatGPT has vast knowledge, it is still critical to combine human creativity with technology to develop impactful ideas. Professor Childs highlighted that there are over 1,500 approaches to creativity, emphasizing that everyone can tap into theirs by finding the right framework. If you're interested in exploring Professor Child's courses, as well as the broader Coursera catalog of over 6,000 courses from top universities and companies, we are offering a subscription to Coursera Plus for just $1. Click the link in the episode description for more details. The offer expires on September 30th, 2023. If you enjoyed this inaugural episode of the Coursera podcast, please rate, review, and share. Until next time, I'm Arunav Sinha. Thank you for tuning in.